welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're tackling a really potent idea from theology, the biblical remnant. Now, for a lot of folks, hearing remnant probably brings to mind, this idea of a spiritual elite.
Right, a select few.
Yeah, a small group you've got to work really hard and be good enough to get into.
Exactly. And our source material today really suggests that way of thinking is, well, it's a massive theological hurdle.
A hurdle? How so?
If we see the remnant, which, it does refer to God preserving a faithful few, but if we see it as something we achieve through our own efforts, we basically misunderstand the whole point of Romans chapter 10.
Okay.
So our deep dive today is really about tracing where saving faith actually comes from and looking at that huge essential difference between, human religious effort and God's grace.
Gotcha. And we're mainly looking at Romans 10, but before we dive into the Apostle Paul's pretty intense analysis, the sources mention something interesting about reading Scripture itself.
Yeah. The jump reading idea.
What's that about, and why bring it up here?
Well, the sources suggest that just reading straight through, chronologically can sometimes put up walls.
Okay.
Especially when you're trying to connect ideas across different books like Genesis, then Micah, then Romans. It's like sometimes the key, you need to unlock something, like how the law fits with God's original promise. Well, that key might be thousands of pages away.
Ah, I see.
So you need that flexibility guided by, revelation perhaps, to connect that distant key back to the lock you're looking at right now.
Makes sense. Okay, let's get into it. Section 1. Religion versus forgiveness.
Starting with the basics, how do the sources define religion in this sort of human effort sense, the small g kind?
Right. The sources are quite stark. They characterize human religion almost as, the devil's way of manifesting control.
Wow. Okay.
It pops up in basically every human society, no matter how simple or advanced their tech is. And it's always defined by rules, standards, laws, changing behavior.
Like dress codes, rituals. Exactly. Dress codes, special diets, mandatory rituals, even trying to force certain ways of thinking. It's all about control through performance, through what you do.
And what's the big critical flaw that, according to the sources, all these human-made religions share?
It's simple but profound. They lack forgiveness completely.
No.
None. Religion judges you, it convicts you, holds you to its standard. But it can never actually offer a pardon, amnesty. It just traps you.
Traps you in trying harder, I guess.
Right. Endless cycles of trying to make up for failures, penance.
And the sources contrast this immediately with the prophet Micah, right?
Yes, Micah 7.18. It's the absolute counterpoint. What God is like you, who pardons sin and forgives the transgression of the remnant of his inheritance. Forgiveness. That's the defining mark, the central message of the true God of the gospel. If whatever spiritual path you're on doesn't have that at its core full, complete pardon, then, the sources argue, you're still stuck in human religion.
This really highlights that distinction between the promise and the law. You mentioned it earlier, sounds crucial for understanding Romans 10.
Oh, absolutely critical. Think of it like this. God first gave Abraham the promise.
Okay.
And that was totally unconditional. A family inheritance, basically. No strings attached. A pure gift.
Got it.
The law, which came much later through Moses, that was different. That was a conditional contract.
Additional.
Yes. And Israel, quite proudly actually, accepted it. They essentially said, yeah, we can do everything you command.
Uh-oh.
Exactly. That moment, that self-reliance, it just led to constant failure, condemnation, judgment. Because, let's face it, humans just can't perfectly keep a conditional contract like that.
So Jesus' role wasn't just about teaching then, it was about the promise.
It was about protecting that original unconditional promise.
Yeah.
He had to fulfill the conditional law perfectly in our place. He had to be the perfect party to the contract so the inheritance wouldn't be lost because of our failure. It was about fulfillment, completion, not just getting rid of the law.
Right, that makes sense. Okay, let's move into Romans 10 itself. Al starts with this real anguish for his own people, the Israelites.
Yeah, deep pain.
They were often the ones persecuting the early believers. And Paul himself, he had incredible zeal, right? He wanted to rush back to Jerusalem, even though he was warned not to.
He absolutely did.
Yeah.
He knew their hearts, their passion. They had immense zeal for God. But, as Paul says, it was not according to true knowledge.
Zeal without knowledge.
Precisely. And that's the core problem, the sources argue, that still affects so many believers today, pouring endless energy into the wrong thing.
And the specific obstacle Paul points to is self-righteousness. Need to be clear what that means here. The sources use autosai, but translate it as self-righteousness or self-effort.
Right. Self-righteousness here means you're ignorant of God's righteousness, the kind he gives as a gift, and instead you're trying to establish your own.
Your own righteousness.
Yeah, it's that deep human desire to take responsibility, to somehow pay the price for your own sin, your own salvation.
And like trying to settle your own debt.
Exactly. And it fundamentally clashes with the whole idea that Christ's work on the cross was finished, complete, enough.
This feels really key. How does that kind of self-righteousness actually show up today, not just in ancient Israel?
Well, the sources are pretty direct about this. Anytime you take a spiritual practice, something good in itself, and turn it into a work.
A work?
Yeah, a work you do to try and reduce your guilt, or maybe earn more favor with God. You're basically practicing self-righteousness.
Can you give an example?
Confession is a great one.
Yeah.
If I confess my sin so that I can become clean, or so that I can feel forgiven, I'm actually relying on my act of confessing, my work, to deal with the guilt, instead of relying only on Christ's blood, which already dealt with the guilt completely.
Wow. Okay, so confession should be more like acknowledging what's already done.
Precisely. It's agreeing with God about the reality of the sin and the reality of the forgiveness already provided, not a ritual to get cleansed.
That's a subtle but huge difference.
It is. And the sources connect this directly to that common anxiety many believers feel. Constantly worried about sin, terrified of losing salvation.
Yeah, that feeling that maybe the gift wasn't really free or could be taken back.
Exactly. That feeling, that anxiety, the sources say, is rooted in failing to really grasp God's righteousness as a totally free, unconditional gift. You're still trying, consciously or unconsciously, to keep your standing through your own performance.
Like, maybe I didn't try hard enough yesterday, so I'm on thin ice today.
And that's just the residue of self-righteousness fighting against grace.
Okay, so Paul then offers the solution, right? Romans 10, verse 4. Christ is the end of the law for righteousness to everyone who believes. The sources stress that end means culmination or destination.
That's right. The law has a job to do. It constantly shows you where you fall short. It's meant to drive you relentlessly towards the only one who could meet its demands.
So the law is like a signpost.
A roadmap? Maybe. But Christ is the destination. If you stop somewhere along the road trying to fix the map or build a house there, you miss the whole point. You miss Christ.
And Paul contrasts the two ways to righteousness, doesn't he? Law versus faith.
Yes. Righteousness by law through Moses is all about doing. The person who does the things written in the law will live by them. It's focused on human action or effort.
Okay.
But righteousness by faith, what Paul calls the will of faith, requires zero human effort in that sense. He says, don't say who's going to go up to heaven to bring Christ down or who's going to go to the deep to bring him up.
Right. Don't bother trying to fetch him.
Exactly. He already came to you. This righteousness is received just by acknowledging, by believing that Jesus came from God from above and that God raised him from the dead.
Okay, but this brings us to that really well-known, maybe often debated verse, Romans 10.9. If you confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. That sounds very much like, steps you have to take, a condition for salvation. Why do the sources argue it's not the condition?
It's a crucial point. Because if belief itself is the condition we fulfill to get saved,
then belief becomes a work.
Then belief becomes our work, exactly.
Yeah.
And boom, we're right back to self-righteousness again. So the sources argue that Romans 10.9 isn't describing the condition for salvation, but the manifestation, the outward sign, the evidence that you've already been saved.
Manifestation, not condition. Can you unpack that a bit? That's different from how many people read it.
Think about inheriting something. Let's say someone leaves you a house in their will. The condition for you getting the house is that the person died and legally left it to you.
Okay.
When you go sign the papers to accept the house, your signature isn't the condition that made the house yours. The will and the death were the conditions. Your signature is just the manifestation, the proof that you've accepted the gift that was already granted.
I see. So faith and confession are like the signature.
They're the evidence that God's Spirit has already done the regenerating work inside you. That's the argument.
That really shifts the whole dynamic. And the sources also talk about the nature of this belief, right? That it's not really our faith.
Absolutely. Because think about it, believing that Jesus is the Son of God who died and rose again. Yeah. Humanly speaking, logically, that's kind of nuts, right?
Yeah, it defies normal logic.
Yet for the believer, it's accepted easily, naturally. That acceptance is the great divide. And the faith we actually live by, Scripture elsewhere calls it the faith of the Son of God.
His faith, not ours.
His perfect, unwavering faith credited to us or working in us. Our personal faith can be up and down, weak, strong. But the faith that saves and sustains is Christ's own faithfulness, given to us when we receive his righteousness. Our belief is just the reflection of that reality.
Okay, wow. That leads perfectly into the last section about humanity's inability to respond. Paul seems to drive this home using a chain of questions.
Yeah, it's a classic rhetorical technique, tracing things back to the source.
How does that chain work?
Well, he follows it backwards.
Yeah.
To call on the Lord for salvation, you first have to believe in him.
Right.
To believe, you first have to hear the message about him.
Makes sense.
To hear, someone has to preach that message. And here's the crucial link. For someone to preach, they must first be sent.
Sent by God.
Sent by God. So when you trace it all the way back, the ultimate origin isn't our calling or our believing or our hearing. It's God choosing to save and God sending his messengers.
So the fundamental reason anyone gets saved is God decided they would be.
That's the profound conclusion, yes. God initiated the entire thing.
And Paul pushes this further, right? Using Isaiah.
He does. He points out that even though the message went out, the voice spread across the world. As Psalm 19 says, people still didn't obey, which leads to this really radical core point the sources emphasize.
Which is?
That humanity, after the fall, has actually lost the ability to respond positively to God without a direct, absolute, necessary intervention from him.
Lost the ability to respond.
Yes. Without what theology calls the regeneration of the Spirit. God has to flip the switch first.
That is heavy. The sources even mention miracles. That God did miracles partly to show that even miracles don't force belief.
That's the staggering implication. Think about it. Miracles might convince your eyes or your mind physically. If a paralyzed man walks, sure, he knows a miracle happened.
Right.
But does that automatically mean his heart is spiritually changed, regenerated, believing in Jesus as Lord? The evidence suggests no. If sheer evidence or miracles could sway our broken human will,
then everyone who saw Jesus' miracles, or the resurrected Christ,
would have instantly believed and been saved. But they weren't. God allows this resistance, this inability to respond, almost to prove the point. Our will is captive. It needs divine liberation first.
Okay. So if we really take that on board, that we can't even initiate belief, that God has to do everything first, what does that do to our idea of, personal pride or effort in salvation?
It just demolishes it completely. If you realize that even the act of believing wasn't something you accomplished, not your contribution, but was itself a gift enabled by God's prior work in you, then everything from the message being sent to you hearing it, to you believing it, it's all from God.
Nothing left to boast about.
Nothing. It's the only way we can genuinely, without any reservation, say all the glory belongs to God. If you hold on to even 1% credit, like, well, I made the choice, you're still clinging to that self-righteousness Paul was warning about.
We've definitely reached the bottom of this deep dive into Romans 10. And the core takeaway seems to be, well, that this remnant isn't about us striving to be good enough.
Not at all.
Yeah.
It's not about our effort to become righteous or even our effort to respond to God. It's about recognizing that God does the absolute necessary foundational work first, enabling us to simply believe and receive the unconditional promise of his righteousness.
Okay, so let's leave our listeners with that provocative thought the sources raise. It quotes Isaiah, "I was found by those who did not seek me." If this radical view is right, that God has to initiate everything, that we can't even properly seek or respond on our own first, how does that change things for you?
Yeah, how does it change how you view evangelism? If your role isn't primarily about persuading, but just being the one who is sent.
And maybe even more personally, how does it change the way you look at your own daily struggles, that feeling of needing to do better all the time?
Does it reframe that struggle entirely?
Because if the sources are right, maybe even the curiosity or the desire that led you to tune into this deep dive today, maybe that wasn't originally your idea either.
That's a powerful thought to sit with.
It really is. We'll definitely have to pick up this thread as Paul continues into Romans 11 next time, exploring more about this remnant.